Again, thanks everyone for joining us. Uh, and I think we're just going to go with this part of the event. And the first person I'm going to call up is Drlandra Larkins. And you will introduce what you're reading and tell us a little bit about why you think it's important to read this right now. So, would you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Drlandra Larkins. I'm a spoken word poet based in Minneapolis. And I'm going to be reading Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, who's also was a poet back in the 20th century. This book was banned in particular because there was in 1997, there was a parent from the Stonewall Jackson High School that spoke out to her school board that this book was, one, hard to translate, and then two, that the use of sexual images in the book. One thing that I would point out is that the comment that it's hard to translate. So this book is full of African American vernacular, and so it's based in Florida, and so the dialects that's being used in this book is Southern dialect. And that's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite books. I was born in Mississippi, and so I understand how the dialect can be a little triggering and like, oh, that's not how you say that word. And so that's one of the reasons why it's my favorite book, because it is so rebellious in language. And so in this chapter, there's two characters. So there's Nanny, and then there's Janie. So Janie is our protagonist, and then Nanny is her grandmother. So in this chapter, Nanny, her grandmother, is trying to convince Janie that you must marry someone, because I'm dying, I'm getting old, and it's time for you to marry a man. And keep in mind, Janie's only 16 years old, so she's like, that's not something I want to do. I don't want to marry some old guy I don't know. But then you also have to keep in mind that the context back then in the 1930s, that's just how marriages were unified. So I'm going to start from when Nanny is trying to convince Janie to marry this old guy. In the last stages of Nanny's sleep, she dreamed of voices far off but persistent and gradually coming nearer. Janie's voice, Janie talking in a whispery snatches with male voices she couldn't quite place, that brought her wide awake. She bolted upright, peered out the window, and saw Johnny Taylor lacerating Janie with a kiss. Janie! The old woman's voice was so lacking in command and reproof, so full of crumbling dissolution, that Janie half believed that Nanny had not seen her. So she extended herself outside of her dream and went inside of the house. That was the end of her childhood. Nanny's head and face looked like the standing roots of some old tree that had been torn away by a storm. Foundations of ancient power that no longer mattered. The cooling Palma Christi leaves that Janie had bound about her grandmother's head with a right rag and wilted down had become part and parcel of the woman. Her eyes didn't bore and pierce. They diffused and melted Janie, the room, the world, into one comprehension. Janie, you's a woman now, so nah, Nanny, nah, I ain't no woman yet. The thought was too new and heavy for Janie. She fought it away. Nanny closed her eyes and nodded a slow, weary affirmation many times before she gave it voice. Yeah, Janie, you've got your womanhood on you. So I'd mount to tell you that I've been saving up a spell. I wants to see you get married right away. Me? Married? Nah, Nanny, no ma'am. What I know about a husband? What I seen just now is plenty for me, honey. I don't want no trashy nigga, no breath and britches like Johnny Taylor using your body to wipe his foot on. Nanny's words made Janie kiss across the room. The gatepost seemed like a manure pile of rain. Look at me, Janie. Don't you sit there with your head hung down. Look at your old grandma. Her voice began nagging prongs of her feelings. I don't want you to be talking to that lack nigga. Fact is, I done been on my knees with my maker many times asking please for him not to take me down a burden too heavy for me to bear. Nanny, I didn't mean nothing bad. That's what makes me scared. You don't mean no harm. You don't even know what harm is. I'm old now. I can't be guiding your feet from out of danger from harm. I want to see you married right away. Who I'm going to marry off the hand like that? I don't know nobody. The Lord will provide. He know I don't bore my burdens. Somebody done spoke to me about you a long time ago. And I said that I was going to be on the way to place you. I wanted you to go to school and pick from a higher bush and a sweeter berry. But that ain't your idea, I see. Nanny, who that been asking you for me? Brother Logan Klecko. He's a good man, too. No, Nanny, no, ma'am. Is that what he been hanging around here for? He looked like some old skullhead in the graveyard. The older woman sat bolt upright and put her feet to the floor and thrust back the leaves from her face. So you don't want to marry a decent man like that, do you? You just want to hang around, hug and kiss and fill around with the first man that give you attention? You wants to make me snuck the same sorrow your mama did? My whole head ain't gray enough. My back ain't bowed enough for you to suit you. The vision of Logan Klecko was desecrating the pear tree, but Janie didn't know how to tell Nanny that. She merely hunched over and pouted to the floor. Janie. Yes, ma'am. You answer me when I speak. Don't you see me pouting with all them boys around you? I done been through enough for you. She slapped the girl's face violently and forced her head back so that their eyes met in struggle. With her hand uplifted for the second blow, she saw the huge tear that welled up from Janie's heart and stood in her eye. She saw the terrible agony and the lips tightened down to hold her back from a cry. Instead, she brushed back the heavy hair from Janie's face, stood there suffering and loving and weeping internally for the both of them. Come to your old grandma, honey. Sat in her lap like you used to. Your nanny wouldn't harm a hair on your head. She don't want nobody else to do it neither if she can help it. Honey, the white man is the ruler of everything as far as I done found out. Maybe it's someplace way off in the ocean where the black man is in power, but we don't know nothing about that till we see it. So the white man throw the load and the nigger pick it up, and then the nigger tell his nigger woman to go ahead and mule for him. I've been praying for it to be different with you. Lord, Lord, Lord. For a long time, she sat rocking with the girl, held tightly to her sunken breast. Janie's long legs dangled over one arm of the chair, and the long braids of her hair swung low on the other side. Nanny half sung, half sobbed a running chant prayer over the girl's weeping head. Lord have mercy. It was just a long time ago. Lord have mercy. It was a long time on the way, but I reckon it had to come. Oh, Jesus, do Jesus. I done the best I could. Finally, they both grew calm. Janie, how long you been loving Johnny Taylor to kiss you? Only this one time, Nanny, and I don't love him at all. What made me do it is, I don't know. Thank you, Master Jesus. I ain't got nothing to do no more, Nanny. Please don't make me marry Mr. Klecko. I ain't Logan Klecko. I want you to have a baby. It ain't Logan Klecko who wants you to have a baby. It's for protection. I'm getting old, honey, and I'm done old. One morning soon now, the angel with the swords is here. The Lord sent that angel to me when you was an infant in my arms, and now you grown. He done spared me to this day. My daily prayer now is that these golden moments is for you to have a husband. I done seen you all my life. Let me wait, Nanny, please, just a little bit more. Don't think I don't feel for you, Janie, because I do. I couldn't love you no more if I had birthed you in my own arms. Fact of the matter is, I love you a whole lot more to protect you. But you got to take in consideration, you ain't no everyday child like most of them. You ain't got no papa. You ain't got no mama. You ain't got nobody but me. And a man is going to protect you. Neither can you stand alone by yourself. The thought of you being kicked around from pillar to pillar to pillar to post is hurting you. Every tear you drop squeeze a cup of blood out of my heart. I got to try and do this before it's my time. A sobbing sigh burst out of Janie. The old woman answered her with little soothing parts on her hand. You know, honey, us colored folks is always branches without roots, and that makes things come around in queer ways. You in particular. I was born back due to slavery, and if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't know what protection was. That's one thing about slavery. You can dream, but nothing can stop me from wishing. You can't beat nobody down so low till you can rob them of their will. I didn't want to be used for work or oxed out like a cow. I didn't want my daughter to be used that way either. It sure wasn't in my will. I even hated the way you was born. But all at the same time, I said, thank God, and got another chance. I wanted to preach a great sermon about colored women sitting on a high that they wouldn't have to pulpit from their white massa. Freedom found me when I gave birth to my daughter in my arms. So I said, I'll take a broom, a cock pot, throw it in the highway, in the wilderness for her. She would expound what I felt. But somehow she got lost off the highway, and the next thing I know, you was here born into the world. So I was tending for you many nights, and now it's time for you to tend for me. I've been waiting for a long time, Janie, but nothing I've been through too much is to take a stand off this high ground like I dreamed of. Old Nanny sat there rocking Janie like an infant and thinking back and back. Mind pictures brought feelings, and feelings dragged out of dramas from the hollows of her heart.
Thank you. One of the things about the Eastside Freedom Library is we are very committed to highlighting the intersection of scholarship and art. And Zora Neale Hurston was one of those people who embodied both of them. And its impact on her work shows. She was an ethnographer and studied to do that, as well as being a writer of fiction and plays. And it's a powerful combination of truth-telling, and that we have that gift staying with us is so important, especially now as there's this strong push to further marginalize a lot of the truth-telling that's happening, which is why we're here today. Next, I am going to welcome up Gen Del Rey, who is going to share something important as well. So, thanks.
Thanks. Is this gonna work? Hello. I'm talking loud enough everyone can hear me? All right. I'm Gen Del Rey. I'm a Minneapolis writer and poet. And the thing I brought to read today is Julie Otsuka's The Emperor When the Emperor Was Divine. It's a 2002 book that was banned last year in a suburb of Milwaukee. And the reason allegedly is that the school board felt that the book was not balanced enough, and that the students should be taught essentially reasons why the US government felt that 125,000 Japanese Americans should be imprisoned during World War II. And so I'm half Japanese. That's part of why the book speaks to me. Also, I don't know, I find that to be a surprisingly common view, like not just, people you read about in the news or people you come across online, but like in real life, sometimes you find people who think that, if that many people were essentially put in prison for 4 years, they must have done something to deserve it. And so I think it's important that students get taught, what really happened. And on top of that, it's just a great book. I think I don't know if anyone who hasn't read it, I really encourage you to read it. I was going to read from the end of the book, but then I realized I don't want to spoil it, and I want everyone to read it. So I changed my mind. I'm reading from the beginning of the book. It opens with the narrator, or with the main character, coming across the executive order, so she's living in Berkeley in California, and she comes across the executive order stapled on all these telephone poles that says that people of Japanese American ancestry will have to be relocated, and they have 9 days to pack their bags. So I'll start with that. Okay. The sign had appeared overnight. On billboards and trees and the backs of the bus stop benches. It hung in the window of Woolworths. It hung by the entrance to the YMCA. It was stapled to the door of the municipal court and nailed at eye level to every telephone pole along University Avenue. The woman was returning a book to the library when she saw the sign in a post office window. It was a sunny day in Berkeley in the spring of 1942, and she was wearing new glasses and could see everything clearly for the first time in weeks. She no longer had to squint, but she squinted out of habit anyway. She read the sign from top to bottom, and then, still squinting, she took out a pen and read the sign from top to bottom again. The print was small and dark. Some of it was tiny. She wrote down a few words from the bank on the back of a bank receipt, then turned around and went home and began to pack. When the overdue notice from the library arrived in the mail 9 days later, she still had not finished packing. The children had just left for school, and boxes and suitcases were scattered across the floor of the house. She tossed the envelope into the nearest suitcase and walked out the door. Outside, the sun was warm, and the palm fronds were clacking idly against the side of the house. She pulled on her white silk gloves and began to walk east on Ashby. She crossed California Street and bought several bars of Lux soap and a large jar of face cream at the Rumford Pharmacy. She passed the thrift shop and the boarded-up grocery, but saw no one she knew on the sidewalk. At the newsstand on the corner of Grove, she bought a copy of the Berkeley Gazette. She scanned the headlines quickly. The Burma Road had been severed, and one of the Dion quintuplets, Yvonne, was still recovering from an ear operation. Sugar rationing would begin on Tuesday. She folded the paper in half, but was careful not to let the ink darken her gloves. At Lundy's Hardware, she stopped and looked at the display of Victory Garden shovels in the window. They were well-made shovels with sturdy metal handles, and she thought for a moment of buying one. The price was right, and she did not like to pass up a bargain. Then she remembered that she already had a shovel at home in the shed. In fact, she had two. She did not need a third. She smoothed down her dress and went into the store. "Nice glasses," Joe Lundy said the moment she walked through the door. "You think?" she asked. "I'm not used to them yet." She picked up a hammer and gripped the handle firmly. "Do you have anything bigger?" she asked. Joe Lundy said that what she had in her hand was the biggest hammer he had. She put the hammer back on the rack. "How's your roof holding out?" he asked her. "I think the shingles are rotting. It's just sprung another leak. It's been a wet year." The woman nodded. "But we've had some nice days." She walked past the Venetian blinds and the blackout shades to the back of the store. She picked out 2 rolls of tape and a ball of twine and brought them back to the register. "Every time it rains, I have to set out the bucket," she said. She put down 2 quarters on the counter. "Nothing wrong with a bucket," said Joe Lundy. He pushed the quarters back toward her across the counter, but he did not look at her. "You can pay me later," he said. Then he began to wipe the side of the register with a rag. There was a dark stain there that would not go away. "I can pay you now," said the woman. "Don't worry about it," said Joe Lundy. He reached into his shirt pocket and gave her 2 caramel candies wrapped in gold foil. "For the children," he said. She slipped the caramels into her purse but left the money. She thanked him for the candy and walked out of the store. "That's a nice red dress," he called out after her. She turned around and squinted at him over the top of her glasses. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you, Joe." Then the door slammed behind her, and she was alone on the sidewalk, and she realized that in all the years she had been going to Joe Lundy's store, she had never before called him by his name, Joe. It sounded strange to her, wrong almost, but she had said it. She had said it out loud. She wished she had said it earlier. She wiped her forehead with a handkerchief. The sun was bright, and she did not like to sweat in public. She took off her glasses and crossed the shady side of the street. At the corner of Shattuck, she took the streetcar downtown. She got off at Kittredge and went into J.F. Hink's department store and asked the salesman if they had any duffel bags, but they did not. They were all sold out. He had sold the last one a half hour ago. He suggested she try J.C. Penney's, but they were sold out of duffel bags there too. They were sold out of duffel bags all over town. When she got home, the woman took off her red dress and put on her faded blue one, her house dress. She twisted her hair up into a bun and put on an old pair of comfortable shoes. She had to finish packing. She rolled up the Oriental rug in the living room. She took down the mirrors. She took down the curtains and shades. She carried the tiny bonsai tree out into the yard and set it down on the grass beneath the eaves where it would not get too much shade or too much sun, but just the right amount of each. She brought the wind-up Victrola and the Westminster chime clock downstairs to the basement. Upstairs, in the boys' room, she unpinned the One World, One War map of the world from the wall and folded it neatly along the crease lines. She wrapped up his stamp collection and the painted wooden Indian with a long headdress he had won at the Sacramento State Fair. She pulled out the Joe Palooka comic books from under his bed. She emptied the drawers. Some of his clothes, the clothes he would need, she left out for him to put into his suitcase later. She placed his baseball glove on his pillow. The rest of his things she put into boxes and carried into the sunroom. The door to the girls' room was closed. Above the doorknob was a note that had not been there the day before. It said, "Do not disturb." The woman did not open the door. She went down the stairs and removed the pictures from the walls. There were only 3. The painting of Princess Elizabeth that hung in the dining room, the picture of Jesus in the foyer, and in the kitchen, a framed reproduction of Millet's The Gleaners. She placed Jesus and the little princess together face down in a box. She made sure to put Jesus on top. She took the Gleaners out of its frame and looked at the picture one last time. She wondered why she had let it hang in the kitchen for so long. It bothered her, the way those peasants were forever bent above that endless field of wheat. "Look up," she wanted to say to them. "Look up, look up." The Gleaners, she decided, would have to go. She set the picture outside with the garbage. In the living room, she emptied all the books from the shelves except Audubon's Birds of America. In the kitchen, she emptied the cupboards. She set aside a few things for later that evening. Everything else, the china, the crystal, the set of ivory chopsticks her mother had sent her 15 years ago from Kagoshima on her wedding day, she put into boxes. She taped the boxes shut with a tape she had bought from Lundy's Hardware and carried them one by one up the stairs to the sunroom. When she was done, she locked the door with 2 padlocks and sat down on the landing with her dress pushed up above her knees and lit a cigarette. Tomorrow, she and the children would be leaving. She did not know where they were going or how long they would be gone or who would be living in their house while they were away. She knew only that tomorrow they had to go. There were things they could take with them: bedding and linen, forks, spoons, plates, bowls, cups, clothes. These were the words she had written down on the back of the bank receipt. Pets were not allowed. That was what the sign had said. It was late April. It was the 4th week of the 5th month of the war, and the woman, who did not always follow the rules, followed the rules. She gave the cat to the Greers next door. She caught the chicken that had been running wild in the yard since the fall and snapped its neck beneath the handle of a broomstick. She plucked out the feathers and set the carcass into a pan of cold water in the sink. And that's all I'll read for now. Thanks.
Thanks again. Another thing that we're really happy about here at the Eastside Freedom Library is that we have a relationship with the Minnesota chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League. We will be doing at least one Day of Remembrance event, and we've learned a lot from our friends about the history behind the Japanese internment during World War II, and the cultural and political and legal aspects, and what that means for us in this culture today, and for a lot of other people as well. So, which reminds me, we always have a lot of events here at the Eastside Freedom Library. Besides this, I welcome everyone to check out our calendar, our events calendar, and join us for more conversations, definitely. With that, I'm going to bring up Merle Geode, who is going to share with us next.
My name is Merle Geode, and I'm a writer that doesn't particularly assign myself to a genre, but I like poetry, and I write essays sometimes, and I make visual art. So I'm here to share a book by George M. Johnson. It's called All Boys Aren't Blue, and actually the book is kind of this ombre of trans flag colors. This is a new book to me, but I picked it because this is actually one of the most banned books in the country right now, and in fact, the American Library Association had it as number 2 on their most challenged book list in 2022, second to Genderqueer, a memoir by Maya Kobabe. According to PEN America, since they first started tracking banned books in the U.S. schools in 2021, this book has been banned 48 times. And that was coming off of a PEN website article from October of this year. This book has been challenged for LGBTQA plus content because it was considered sexually explicit. For example, in this year alone, the Frisco Independent School District in Texas received requests for the reconsideration of 28 titles from State Representative Jared Patterson. 23 of them were retained. On recommendation from review committees, Patterson appealed the decision, and All Boys Aren't Blue were among the titles removed on appeal. I'm going to read a quote that I pulled from George M. Johnson, which was from the PEN Pod with George M. Johnson on November 2021. This is in their own words about why they think the book was banned. My book is being challenged so ardently because my book is telling the truth. And we know that the United States of America has always had an issue with any type of text that tells the truth. Whether we are talking about the origins of this country through genocide and through slavery, or whether we are talking about how the forefathers were slave owners themselves and were actually terrible people, this country has had a way of creating an alternative truth around some of their greatest heroes, as well as an alternative truth just around what the actual narrative of America is. And so when I put a text out into the world that is a Black queer coming of age story that tells the truth about what actually happens to Black children in school systems, or what actually happens to Black queer children in school systems who have to deal with the intersection of race and identity and sexuality, all while fighting many of the oppressions of anti-Blackness and racism. We call out those truths and we speak truth into power. It makes people fearful. I'm going to move into reading an excerpt. Well, actually, this is going to be a whole essay. This is a teen memoir, as far as I think libraries are concerned with categorizing it, but I've been enjoying reading it as an adult, so I hope that this will also bring some intergenerational appeal to younger viewers as well. This is a selection, an essay called A Lesson Before Dying, and I chose this one because it kind of goes beyond identity, and I like that it really hits home to me the amount of, just like multidimensional, aspects that go into anyone who is queer, anyone who is, Black and queer, or just any combination of intersections that we are so much more than just our identities. A Lesson Before Dying. This is likely the hardest chapter I'll ever write, and frankly, I'm not even sure if it fits with the themes of Blackness or queerness or critical race theory in this book, nor do I really care. This chapter is the most important one because there is no solution. There is no happy ending. It's the hardest lesson we all have to learn about love and loss. No one's days are infinite, and I can't keep anyone here forever. Nanny was never too shy to say what was on her mind. She got to a place in her life where she was simply unfiltered, and knowing her life story, she had rightfully earned that spot. As I've said, Nanny grew up as the youngest of 13 children. When she was a baby, she lost 2 brothers and a sister to a house fire. Throughout the years, she would lose more brothers and sisters, and although she was the baby, she was always the leader of the group. She didn't know how not to lead and did a damn good job holding that position down. By the start of this particular story, we were all teenagers. Well, at least little Raye, Russell, and my cousin Thomas were there. Thomas was my Uncle Bobby's son that lived in Jersey City who used to visit us from time to time when we were growing up. Thomas was always a joy to be around and always had some crazy story about what was going on in the projects of Jersey City. He now moved to Plainfield and stayed with Nanny. I was either 12 or 13, and Garrett was nearly 10 years old at the time. By now, we had left the big house, and Nanny had moved to the other side of town, living with my Aunt Sarah and Aunt Monk, again in a split-level house on Lewis Avenue, still in Plainfield, though. The house wasn't as big as the big house, but it worked just as well. It had a big backyard and side yard and was in a very quiet neighborhood. We all used to congregate there after school, just like we used to do at the big house. The teen years were interesting for us because it meant we had no real adult supervision most days. Little Raye and Thomas were put in charge of the house, which meant that no one was really in charge of the house. We would sneak and drink liquor from the liquor cart and refill the bottles with water. My aunts didn't often drink the old stuff sitting in the cabinet, so they never noticed. We would watch the inappropriate channels on the cable box, curse, and do anything we had no business doing. It was a house of puberty. There were high fives and praise from one another when we started growing pubic hair, the first sign that we were becoming men. Of course, it wasn't like this all the time since my aunts and Nanny did live there. We just knew their schedules well enough to find gaps where the shenanigans could take place. This became our home away from home, and I thought it was great that we all got the chance to grow up as brothers rather than just cousins. My favorite moment at the new house was also one of the most important life lessons I ever learned and continue to practice until this day: how to take care of my elders. It's something that I wished more of us learned as children, especially Black children, who will inevitably take on the responsibility as their parents and grandparents begin to age. We were downstairs in the den area toward the back of the house. There was a hallway from that room that led into Nanny's room. All the cousins were there watching TV, and Nanny yelled, "Thomas, come in here real quick." Thomas got up and started walking down the hallway to Nanny's room. He opened Nanny's door and let out the biggest scream, not one of fear, but more along the lines of OMG! Of course, we all being nosy ran down the hallway and saw Nanny standing there in her girdle with her stockings on, needing help to get undressed. I started to laugh at Thomas's over-the-top reaction, while Raye also turned away laughing, but I was used to Nanny like this. You see, little Raye and Thomas had just recently started staying with Nanny again, so they weren't familiar with helping her out like I was. I had assisted my grandmother in getting dressed and undressed for years already, so it was nothing to me. For them, though, it was a shock. Helping Nanny get ready required a few things. She couldn't always snap her girdle in the back, so you would sometimes have to help her do it. She was also a survivor of breast cancer twice and had to have a double mastectomy, which meant the removal of both breasts. She was a warrior, though, and her battle scars just made her a more confident person. She had these cones that she would use to fill out her bra. I would help her put them on, too, sometimes. So we all stood there, and Thomas goes, "Nanny, put some clothes on. I don't want to see you in your drawers." She responded, "You better get used to it. You might have to wipe my ass one day." We all lost it at this point. She was laughing, and we were screaming with laughter. That's how it always was with us. This was family, and although she was our matriarch, at times she was just one of the boys. Having fun with her grands, as she used to say. Eventually, the laughter subsided, and I walked into the room and helped her get adjusted. I grabbed her coverall that she would wear once she got home. I believe most call them muumuus. She thanked me and then got in the bed to watch some TV, and I went back into the other room to hang with my cousins. We all laughed about it some more as the two of them talked about how they were going to have to get used to living with her. "You might have to wipe my ass one day." This was a sermon. These words turned out to be greater than anything I had ever heard from her by this point in my life, and I have been carrying them with me since. There is a lot of truth in those 9 words, and I'm not really sure when a family should start talking to kids and grandkids about how one day the child becomes the parent. But for us, that was lesson number 1, and I don't think any of us ever forgot it. It made me reflect on a similar moment when I wasn't ready for that role. When I was 10, my mother had to have her first brain surgery. I remember that surgery and the months leading up to it and after it very well. She survived the surgery, but the adults didn't want us to see her like that after the procedure, so we stayed with my grandmother while she recovered. We finally got to see her a few weeks later when she came home. I remember her having staples on the side of her head and my eyes getting big as quarters when I saw them. She could see from our faces that we were so scared, but she assured us that she was fine. It was great to have my mother back. But what would my responsibilities be moving forward? What did a 10-year-old know about taking care of a parent? Hell, at that time, I wasn't really doing much of anything for myself besides pouring my own cereal and a few chores around the house. It wasn't time for me or my brother as children to take up that role. My family made the decision that it wasn't the right time for the child to become an adult. My mother would be out of commission for more than 6 months, and my grandmother and her church friends took it upon themselves to care for her. They cooked and cleaned and made sure that we got to school every day. Nanny practically moved into the guest room to take care of her. My family always seemed to make a way out of no way. Thankfully, my family ensured that as kids got to remain kids. However, by the time I was 15, I would have to take up more of this caretaking role. Nanny's sister, Auntie Evelyn, would call on me to help her with her husband, Uncle Lester, who had a stroke and was unable to do really much for himself anymore. She would need me to run errands from time to time and would call me to come and watch him. It was interesting at first because my aunts and uncles would all suggest that they could watch him, but she didn't want them to do it. She specifically asked me to help, and I was glad to. I remember my mom checking in with me the first time, like, "You sure you want to do this?" I told her, "Yeah, it's my uncle. I should want to help take care of him." She would drop me off over there, and I would watch him for a few hours. Auntie Evelyn would pay me, and I would go back home. It never dawned on me at the time how big a responsibility it actually was. Caring for older human beings is truly a blessing. They are our living ancestors, and something they did paved a way for us to exist. It's the least that we can do to care for them. Nanny really meant that we may have to wipe her ass one day. On July 23rd, 2018, we all sat in the waiting room of Overlook Hospital in Summit, New Jersey. Just days before this, the doctors had said they found a mass on your brain, Nanny. It was a rare form of cancer known as glioblastoma, and they would need to do surgery to remove it. There I was, having just turned in this book with the end of the chapter written so differently. The saying you coined in jest so many years ago was now coming to fruition. I took a week off in August to come and watch you while my mom and her aunts went out of town. I was there to take you to your first round of radiation and chemotherapy treatment. I cooked your breakfast and helped you get dressed every day, measured out your insulin and gave you your shots 3 times a day. I even helped you shower and I changed the potty you had by your bed. There wasn't a single time when I didn't want to do those things for you. Here was the lesson you taught 20 years ago, playing out. And in this moment, I know why this chapter defines the entire book. There would be no book without you. There would be no stories, and I wouldn't have turned out to be this person telling the story if you weren't there to guide my ship, to protect me on my journey from childhood to adolescence, right on up to being an adult. Even in your darkest and most fearful time, you told me that your only regret was leaving us behind. If the rest of the world could learn anything from you and this story, it is that love is an unconditional thing. That taking care of someone who took care of you is one of the most powerful and transformative things you could do on this earth. Your saving me will allow me, my words, and our story to save others, because at the end of the day, this is all about storytelling. I remember when I signed the book deal, I kept imagining this image at the book launch event of me reading a chapter about you and you sitting there in your Sunday best, smiling like you always do. I don't know if you're even going to see the finished product. The lesson before dying still holds true, though. Despite all I've been through on this journey as a Black queer person, I still need to find a way to leave here with no true regrets, just as you have decided to do. Although there are still many more memories to make, I know our final chapter will one day come. I sat with you right after Christmas 2018, and we planned your funeral together. There were no tears, though. It was you, in your element, controlling the things you could still control. Your words that day were, I've accepted that this cancer is going to take me one day. I'm not saying I'm leaving tomorrow, but I just want all my business handled. Cancer went to one breast in the 80s and you beat it. Cancer then went to your second breast in the 90s and you beat it again. Cancer then went to your lung in the 2000s and you beat it then. Now it's in your brain, a place where you can't fight it. But little does cancer know that you are a godly woman. So the joke is on cancer because one day you will be in a place where it can never get to you again. I'm controlling the things in my power. I'm putting energy into the things I can change and praying about the rest. And as you said, living my life with no regrets. We still have time left here together, and we will have the memories forever. Thank you.
Thanks, Merle. One of the things they read from the author is really instructive as far as what we're trying to do here at the Eastside Freedom Library. What we want to do is to tell a truer narrative of the society that we live in. And America really doesn't make sense without a lot of the missing stories, without a lot of the missing history. And that is why it is so important not only to speak when we can, but to make sure that this literature is accessible. And that truly is very threatening to a lot of people because there's a lot of power in making things not make sense. We have this idea that this country was created out of nothing, like God created the universe, and it's just not true. And we are daily filling in those stories, so thank you. Our last reader I will bring up now, Danny Klecko. If you want to join us up here, we will be honored and pleased as well.
All right, thank you. Let me get set. So, thank you, Eastside Freedom Library. It's always an honor for me to do anything with these people. They've been around for a while, and every time I come here, I leave less ignorant, and it's just so nice to have a place like this in my community where I can learn and I can grow with people who don't judge me and who don't threaten, but are constantly striving to make St. Paul and the world a better place. So if you have any way of supporting them, you know, it would be well worth it. So anyways, the book that I'm going to talk about tonight is one of my favorites. It's called The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. And it was written in 1939. Some people viewed it as a communist propaganda, and many farmers and agriculture groups were irate that this book fomented anger about their labor practices. This book was a pack of lies, was the Associated Farmers of California. Now, this was based off of Steinbeck's journalism work that he did in San Francisco newspaper, and it covered the different camps in the Salinas Valley in California. 7 articles were printed in 1936 about farm workers and Dust Bowl refugees, and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt kind of became a Steinbeck groupie, and she followed him around and brought him to the White House and talked about how all these people were being mistreated. 14 million copies were sold, and so even though it was popular, a lot of people disliked Steinbeck, and for the first time in his life, he had to carry a gun to keep himself safe. And the book won the National Book Award and was instrumental in him winning the Pulitzer Prize. This book was banned in Cali, St. Louis, Illinois, New York, KC, Iowa, and Bama, specifically for foul language, communist implications, religious themes, and sexuality. However, one of my writing mentors told me, America hated this book because it was the first book. In 1939, white men ruled America. And this was one of the first books. You know, in 39, they didn't have to compete against people of color. They didn't have to compete against women. It was hard to be a white man and fail in 1939. In this book, The Grapes of Wrath, it showed the white man's vulnerability, and it's one of the most humiliating experiences that I've read of any color, of any nation, and but it's beautifully written, and it's a very important story that all people should read. One of the more profound chapters is chapter 5, and this takes place where the nation is falling apart, people are starving, and the corporations, the man, is pitting neighbor against neighbor. So basically, everyone's being pushed out of their neighborhood, and they're paying that one guy in the neighborhood to push you out. So let's get started. At noon, the tractor driver stopped, sometimes near a tenant house, and opened his lunch. Sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, white bread, pickle, cheese, Spam. A piece of pie branded like an engine part. He ate without relish, and tenants not yet moved away came to see him, looked curious while the goggles were taken off and the rubber dust mask leaving white circles around the eyes and a large white circle around the nose and the mouth. The exhaust of the tractor puttered on. For fuel is so cheap, it's more efficient to leave the engine running than to heat the diesel nose for a new start. Curious children crowded close, ragged children who ate their fried dough as they watched. They watched hungrily an unwrapping of the sandwiches, and their hunger sharpened. Noses smelled the pickle, cheese, and Spam. They didn't speak to the driver. They watched his hand as it carried food to his mouth. They did not watch him chewing. Their eyes followed the hand that held the sandwich. After a while, the tenant who could not leave the place came out and squatted in the shade beside the tractor. "Why, you're Joe Davis's boy." "Sure," the driver said. "Well, what are you doing this kind of work for against your own people?" $3 a day. I got damn sick of creeping for my dinner and not getting it. I got a wife and kids. We got to eat. $3 a day, and it comes every day. "Well, that's right," the tenant said. "But for your $3 a day, 15 or 20 families can't eat at all. Nearly 100 people have to go out and wander the roads for your $3 a day. Isn't that right?" And the driver said, "Yeah, can't think of that. Got to think of my own kids. $3 a day, and it comes every day. Times are changing, mister, don't you know? Can't make a living on the land unless you got 2, 5, 10,000 acres and a tractor. Cropland isn't for little guys like us anymore. You don't pick up a howl because you can't make up Fords or because you're not the telephone company. Well, crops are like that now. Nothing to do about it. You try to get $3 a day someplace. That's the only way." The tenant pondered. "Funny thing how it is. if a man owns a little property, that property is him. It's part of him, and it's like him. If he owns property, only he can walk on it and handle it and be sad when it isn't doing well and feel fine when the rain falls on it. That property is him. In some way, he's bigger because he owns it, even if it isn't successful. He's big with his property. That is so. Then the tenant pondered more. But let a man get property he doesn't see, or can't take time to put his finger in, or can't be there to walk on it, why, then that property is that man. He can't do what he wants. He can't think what he wants. The property is the man, stronger than he is, and he is small, not big. Only his possessions are big, and he's a servant to his property. That is so. The driver munched the branded pie and threw the crust away. Times are changed, don't you know? Thinking about stuff like that don't feed the kids. Get your $3 a day. Feed your kids. You got no call to worry about anybody's kids but your own. You get a reputation for talking like that, and you'll never get $3 a day. Big shots won't give you $3 a day if you worry about anybody else, and if you keep talking about your $3 a day. Nearly 100 people on the road for your $3. Where will they go? And that reminds me, the driver said, you better get out soon. I'm going to go through your dooryard after dinner. You filled in well this morning. I know. We had to keep the line straight, and I'm going through that dooryard after dinner. Well, you know, Joe Davis, my old man, I'll tell you this. I got orders. Wherever there's a family not moved out, if I have an accident, get too close, cave in the house a little, well, I might get a couple of dollars. And my youngest kid, he's never had no shoes yet. I built it with my own hands. Straightened old nails to put the sheathing on. Rafters are wired to the stringers with baling wire. It's mine. I built it. You bump it down, and I'll be in the window with the rifle. You even come too close, and I'll pot you like a rabbit. It's not me. There's nothing I can do. If I lose my job and don't do it, look, suppose you kill me. They'll just hang you. But long before you're hung, there'll be another guy on the tractor, and he'll bump that house down. You're not killing the right guy. That's so, the tenant said. Who gave the orders? I'll go after him. He's the one to kill. You're wrong. He got the orders from the bank. The bank told him, clear those people out. It's your job. Well, there's a president at the bank. There's a board of directors. I'll fill up the magazine of the rifle and go into the bank. And the driver said, fellow was telling me the bank gets orders from the east. The orders were, make the land show profit or we'll close you up. But where does it stop? Who can we shoot? I don't aim to starve death before I kill the man who's starving me. I don't know. Maybe there's nobody to shoot. Maybe the thing isn't a man. Maybe it's like you. And maybe it's like you said how the property's doing it. Anyway, I told you my orders. I got to figure, the tenant said. We all got to figure. There's some way to stop this. It's not like lightning or earthquakes. We've got a bad thing made by men. And God, that's something that we can change. The tenant sat in the doorway, and the driver thundered his engine and started off, tracks falling and curving, harrows combing. And then the cedar slipping into the ground across the dooryard, the tractor cut, and the hard foot-beaten ground was seeded field. And the tractor cut through again an uncut space that was 10 feet wide. And then he came back. The iron guard bit into the house corner, crumbled the wall, and wrenched the little house from its foundation so it fell sideways, crushed like a bug. And the driver was goggled and rubber mask, covered his nose and mouth. The tractor cut straight line on, and the air ground vibrated with its thunder. The tenant man stared after him, his rifle in his hand, his wife beside him, and the quiet children behind. And all of them stared after the tractor. Thank you.
Thanks, Klecko. If you are here at the library, you'll see a few things about the 1934 Teamster strike. And this is pretty much the same era. And one of the things that I'm always reminded of in this kind of scenario is there are people who are policed and people who are not. And this story sort of shows you can destroy a family and get away with it and make someone else do it. But if you respond to that, you're going to jail or you're gonna get hung. And it's like, that is policing. And that is, like, I guess, the world order that this work and much of the work that we're doing is pushing against. So thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, everyone who is on the live stream. We are grateful that you're here.